Hello and welcome back. And we're talking about public health, public policy, and we're in our third module. And very pleased to be back in front of the video camera for you. Just a little review of where we've been. Our assessment so far has been the concept of developing what I call policy action plans. And again, the focus really is on the term action. These are action-oriented approaches to impacting public health, public policy. And our first module, we focused really on the forum and the actors and the who makes the policy decisions. The second module, we looked at the process a bit. So those are both kind of technical assessments of where we go in the policymaking world to have an impact. Today we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to get more kind of into the advocacy arena. And this will be kind of a more fun conversation with you today. And again, what we'll do is we'll post exercises and assignments on our virtual resource room, and we'll be expecting you to do some work there. But in the meantime, what I want to talk today about is something that, again, is more fun, but also very, very important to a holistic, strategic policy action plan. And what we're going to be talking about today is how you develop an issue campaign, the marketing and messaging that goes along with an initiative. So marketing and messaging is really what our goals and objectives are for today. And what I'd like to do is provide a framework for thinking about the marketing and messaging that we all are inundated with throughout each and every day of our lives. We see these symbols, we see these words, we see these pictures, and they mean something to us both consciously and unconsciously. Now, bear in mind that the large multinational corporations, the conglomerates, utilize marketing and messaging as a key component to their product development and their product distribution. And so we in public health, while we do not have the financial resources to develop an issue campaign the way that, say, a McDonald's can, or a pharmaceutical company can, or an Archer Daniels Midland can, what we have to do is be creative, use our creativity in problem solving, look at budgets on a shoestring to make things happen. And again, in the resource room, I'll post examples of what I'm talking about that have come up in the public health context. And I'll use one example today out of the obesity prevention work that I've mentioned in previous sessions. But what I want to do first is kind of frame it. So we talk about the corporate culture using marketing and messaging, and obviously there's some very, very kind of obvious examples. The golden arches of McDonald's, a well-recognized symbol that people around the globe are familiar with. Also, at McDonald's, for instance, is the Ronald McDonald, okay, the kind of motto, the slogan. While what does a clown have to do with fast food hamburgers? What we know is that more kids can identify Ronald McDonald than can identify the President of the United States. So what's the impact of public health? Now, I want to have a very important footnote here, which is that I don't want to seem like I'm vilifying the corporations. As we will learn later in our stakeholder analysis, and as we'll learn in our action-oriented policy approach moving forward, engaging these corporations at the table as we're talking about public health solutions is critical. So I'm not one that gets up in front of a room and vilifies McDonald's or vilifies the pharmaceuticals. It's important to understand that strategically they spend billions of dollars on these efforts to build product awareness. And that's what we need to do in public health around our initiatives. So when you think about a McDonald's, you think about a symbol like the golden arches that are well recognized. You think about a slogan or a mascot like Ronald McDonald that has such broad-based recognition in the world. One of the examples that I like to use is in the context of pharmaceuticals. I like to talk about the little purple pill, which was kind of prevalent many years ago. And lots of things went on with the marketing of this little purple pill. So first of all, you think of things like the fact that it's little. You think about the fact that it's purple. Probably millions of dollars was spent on surveying and market analysis to determine should the pill be purple or should the pill be blue. So they came up with this little purple pill, and I don't recall the company and it's not really relevant, but they came up with this little purple pill, and then they had these great advertisements with this beautiful woman running through, kind of dancing through the field, after she'd taken the little purple pill, and it was really recognizable. It was a very powerful, advertising campaign. And so they used things like size and shape and color and symbols like this beautiful woman and this meadow and this stream and the blue sky to help sell their product, to help market an issue or help market a product. It's really very similar in terms of what we need to be doing when we're talking about public health, public policy. So those are a couple of examples. We also have examples like a company, an Illinois company you may be familiar with if you're from Illinois, which is Archer Daniels Midland. They have a slogan, a phrase, supermarket to the world. Archer Daniels Midland, supermarket to the world. Now this is of particular sensitivity to policy folks like myself who do a lot of work on food security and food access, and the term supermarket carries a particular weight in terms of our work around providing healthy foods in communities. And so something like a phrase like supermarket to the world really kind of makes us stand back and pause and take notice. And what Archer Daniels Midland does is they create soy products predominantly and corn-based products. And so they're headquartered in central Illinois, where we have the richest farmland and access to millions of acres of land. And what's growing on that land are corn and soybeans, not produce, not organic food, not locally grown food, but large swaths of land taken up by corn and soybean. These are not food per se. The soybean is a process that then goes into making food products, but it's not a food per se very often, unless, there's edamame, but that's one example. The corn that they grow in central Illinois is not feed corn. It's not edible corn for the most part. It's feed corn. It's corn that's used in ethanol and corn syrup. So again, you can see they call themselves supermarket to the world, but what they're really predominantly producing are corn and soybean products. So it's just kind of an interesting example. And all three of those examples, McDonald's, the pharmaceuticals, and Archer Daniels Midland, all you can see that very tangent linkage to public health, public policy issues. And so what do we do when we're battling increasing epidemic rates of obesity. How do we garner the resources necessary to engage our stakeholders and get our message out in terms of obesity prevention in particular, when we're battling the golden arches and supermarket to the world. So what I want to do is provide a framework for you. And so there's different tools that we can use in marketing and messaging, and I've mentioned them in passing slightly, and let's go into them a little bit. So for instance, in marketing and messaging, you can use words. I just mentioned supermarket to the world. Other examples are even you can prevent forest fires. Or another one is this is your brain on drugs. Okay? Or one of my favorite in terms of marketing, not necessarily in the context of public health, which again, you can see a public health linkage to this message. You can see a public health linkage to this message. But one of my favorites is Southwest Airlines, where they use the word cheap fares. They've gotten their whole marketing approach down to 2 words: cheap fares. How brilliant is that? And that defines their business plan. That defines their strategic directions in terms of where they're going as a business. Everything is driven then by this concept of cheap fares. So in terms of marketing and messaging, we can come up with words that help define. In my case, in the work that I do around obesity prevention, for instance, I have always been interested in the policy work that I do around childhood obesity prevention. I've always been interested, and key to my approach is this crosswalk between public health and public education. We know from our last module that we looked at the school health forum as a way of gathering data around childhood obesity rates. Okay? We can also look to the school as a captive environment in which we can deal with many of the issues that are prevalent in the conversations around childhood obesity prevention. We can look at the food that children eat during the day. If you think of a child living at or below the poverty level, oftentimes that child is having their breakfast at school, their lunch at school, an after-school snack at school. Most of what children eat in many settings is provided during the school day. We also then look at what's served during that time. What is happening in that lunchroom? One of the policy action plans I've been working on that I'm really kind of interested in is this concept of using the lunch ladies as nutrition educators. So we look at the impact of food on obesity prevention and the impact that it has during the school day in this captive environment. We also look at physical activity, resource, physical education, safe routes to school. There's so many touches on the school day to physical activity. So when we start looking at childhood obesity prevention, the epidemic of childhood obesity prevention, the impact it has on the cost of our health care, it's just enormous. And so when we look at action-oriented policy approaches, we look at the linkage, the crosswalk between public health and public education. And so my messaging that I've developed and used over the years, many years, is that healthy children learn better. So I've gotten my message down to 4 words. healthy children learn better. And I can give you an example of where that comes into play. If I'm meeting with a superintendent or an educational leader and I say, I'm interested in working with you on the impact of obesity on the children in your school, and we're looking at ways in which we can come into the school with interventions. And the superintendent or educational leader looks at me and says, I can't focus on obesity prevention right now. I have to focus on math scores and reading scores and performance-based measures. And I turn to the person, and I've done this on many occasions, and I said, yes, but Mr. Superintendent, healthy children learn better. So in those 4 words, I've encapsulated this research-based linkage, research and evidence-based link between health and education. And I want you to bear in mind that those are key components of a policy action plan, particularly when it comes to the marketing and messaging, is research and evidence-based linkages. Okay, so we have, for examples, in this marketing and messaging, the concept of using words. We also have the concept of using symbols. So for instance, I mentioned the golden arches. And we can think of many symbols that are used. For instance, a lot of times we use these ribbons as symbols of an initiative or of a cause. We know that there's symbols that are used. And I can give you another example of a symbol from here at University of Illinois Chicago School of Public Health. We have a program here called Ceasefire. Ceasefire, which you may have heard about because they just had this movie called The Interrupters that really highlighted the work of Ceasefire, the concept of going into communities and working with former gang people to intervene with youth today to stop the violence. And so Ceasefire, as an example, uses words. For instance, they use the phrase stop, period, killing, period, people. And of course, that can be stop killing people, or it can be stop killing people, okay? Or it can be read in other ways. Very powerful message. They also have this, and I'm not going to do this very well, but they have this figure that's kind of like a stick figure that's like laid out on the ground, like the figure that at the crime scene. That's one of their symbols, and people recognize that symbol. Another symbol that's often used, and I'm not a very good artist, but is a puzzle piece. And puzzle pieces are a symbol of autism. Okay? And it's the type of thing where when I ask my students if they know that the puzzle piece is a symbol of autism awareness, it's been growing a little bit over the past 15 years that I've been teaching, but it's only at about 50% saturation, okay, awareness. So the autism community, if they're using that puzzle piece as their main symbol, okay, needs to do a better job of getting their message across. So we also have color. So for instance, the color pink, is obvious. If you were in the classroom, I would get probably 90 to 100% positive response on this. And I know this from my work in the classroom for many years, that this is breast cancer awareness. Okay? And we have other colors. Purple, blue, yellow. You can think of Lance Armstrong's work around cancer, where he has live strong. He has his bands, wristbands, which is his symbol, and then he has the color yellow. So again, very strategic marketing and messaging approach to these things. So we can look at words, we can look at symbols, and we can look at color to kind of devise a nice marketing and messaging program. Now, I wanted to give you another example of one in the obesity prevention work that I've been doing with an organization here in Chicago called CLOC, the Consortium to Lower Obesity in Chicago Children. Now, the name itself, CLOC, is well known, C-L-O-C-C, is well known around by obesity prevention folks in town here. People know CLOC. Their name recognition is pretty high. So many years ago, they embarked on a marketing and messaging campaign for youth called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And as one of our assignments, I will ask you to look at the CLOC website and look at the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go campaign. But I'll just give you a brief overview of it. There are colors embedded, there's a logo embedded, and then each of these numbers represents a research and evidence-based intervention to obesity and supporting obesity prevention. 5 servings of fruits and vegetables, 4 glasses of water, 3 servings of non-fat dairy, 2 hours of screen time maximum, and 1 hour of physical activity. Now, see, I knew those off the top of my head, and I did that. I'm able to remember that because of this messaging that they've given me. This 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go, meaning let's be physically active. That was kind of an add-on. So we have this as an example coalition in Chicago, a non-profit coalition, the Consortium to Lower Obesity in Chicago Children. And they were able to come up with a very sophisticated marketing and messaging campaign. Now they engaged a marketing firm here in town to help them come up with this. They spent hours in terms of surveying and questioning and getting out there to see if this message would work. But it's part of who they are now. CLOC is identified with this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go initiative. And it works. So I remember all of these. Now, of course, each and every one of these we can have an hour conversation about. And we'll probably do some of that in online in terms of some of our assignment work and our exercises, is looking at these 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and see, make sure do we do this check and balance on the research and evidence base. For instance, this is your brain on drugs. I'd never quite understood why they, what that meant and why they used a fried egg. I mean, I always think of the person that's, stoned wanting to eat the fried egg. So it's like, why is this symbol a good one that they used? And of course, this is part of may not have been exactly, but part of this overall initiative at the federal level called DARE. Okay? And again, you all probably are familiar with DARE, which again was attempting to be a research and evidence-based program, but really never really got off the ground in that way. The research demonstrates that it was not very effective in reducing drug use among young people. And again, you'll remember their words, their slogan, dare to keep your kids off drugs or on drugs. I don't remember which one it was. Dare to keep your kids on something. And I don't exactly remember what the DARE stands for. So again, sometimes when we use acronyms, we have to make sure that we're using them effectively. So there's a linkage. This is, forest. This is the Forest Service. And so there's a linkage back then to there's a linkage back then to the organization that's creating this market and messaging piece. So in summary, again, we'll be doing some exercises and some assignments through our virtual resource room, but what I wanted to do was kind of give you a frame for thinking about how you would develop a marketing and messaging approach to your action-oriented public health initiative, using words, using symbols, using color. One of the ones that I'll be asking you to look at as an exercise, as a final note for the day, is let's move. And I will ask you to go and really look at that initiative of the First Lady. And you'll recall from when we did the kind of policy-making forum and the actors, we listed the First Lady as somebody who's important. This is the First Lady's Obesity Prevention Initiative, and we'll be looking at that as an example. So I've given you some examples, kind of food for thought, if you will, and I'll be posting more information in the resource room to get us moving on some assignments and exercises. Thank you very much.